That loud, constructed anthem coming out of those 80 recruits is yours now. You built it. You shaped it from nothing. You constructed it from the stammering, wide-eyed, slack-jawed collection of civilians that stumbled off that bus 11 weeks ago. That voice is your work. That volume, that snap, that precision, everything belongs to you now. You put that there. You earned it. And you have approximately 4 weeks before this platoon graduates, and you will have to start all over again with 80 new ones who have none of all this discipline. And your job is to do whatever it takes again, whatever will cost you again, to turn these civilians into recruits, and then turn those recruits into soldiers. This is your life for the next 3 years.
Most people have seen you before on many occasions, in every military branch, in every boot camp, in every viral video of some terrified recruit standing at attention while you are in your campaign cover hat and you turn the air around you into something pressurized and dangerous. They watched you and thought they really understood you. No, they didn't. They thought you are the villain. You are not the villain. You are the real architect. And what you are building, quietly, brutally, and methodically, is this person, this recruit standing in front of you. These recruits don't even know what you are building yet. They have no idea what you are about to make them become yet. They have no clue every effort you are putting in just to make them be that person. You are the one who carries the weight of transformation on your back for 3 years straight, pours it into cycle after cycle of strangers, and pays a price for it that nobody talks about. Welcome to the other side of the campaign cover. This is what it's like to be on the other side of that equation, what it's like to be a drill instructor. Stay with this, because this one goes somewhere most people never look.
How you got here. You didn't accidentally become a drill instructor. You volunteered. After your first enlistment, after at least one deployment, after you'd accumulated enough time and experience and rank that someone looked at your record and said you were eligible, then you raised your hand. Or maybe the Corps raised it for you, with a strongly worded suggestion that amounted to the same thing. Either way, you went to drill instructor school. And drill instructor school is its own particular kind of suffering, because now you're not just being trained, you're being watched. Every hour, every reaction, every moment of weakness or hesitation or imprecision gets noted by the instructors above you, who are themselves former DIs, who know every tell, every shortcut, every place a man hides when he doesn't want to be seen.
You learn the voice first. The drill instructor voice is not simply loud. Loud is easy. The DI voice is controlled projection, diaphragm-driven, sustained, capable of filling a squad bay or a parade deck without breaking, without going hoarse for hours at a time. You practice it until your throat adapts, until the voice becomes a tool you pick up and put down rather than something that costs you. You learn the knowledge, every general order, every rank, every weapon system, every regulation governing recruit training. You are tested on these constantly and without mercy because you cannot teach what you don't own completely. You learn the bearing, the stillness, the way a drill instructor can stand motionless in front of 80 people and generate more pressure through silence than most people generate through noise. You learn that your face is a tool. You learn that a look, a pause, a single raised eyebrow can do more work than 10 minutes of yelling. Then after all those, they hand you a campaign cover and a platoon, and the clock starts.
Your version of the first night. That first night, you yourself remembered clearly that you've once been on that bus side. You remember the yellow footprints. You remember what it felt like when that door opened. Now it's your turn. Now you're the one standing outside the door. The bus is 30 seconds out. You've been awake since yesterday. Your hat is on straight. Your uniform is correct. Your voice is ready. Your other fellow DI is positioned on the opposite side. You've talked through the first 30 minutes together. You know exactly where each of you will be. You know what you'll say. You have all designed how the chaos will be directed, because it must be directed. That's the part nobody on the bus understands. What looks like mayhem to those 18-year-old recruits is a choreographed operation executed by professionals.
The bus door opens, and you become something else entirely. Not a different person, just an activated version of yourself. The volume, the intensity, the controlled aggression, it's real, but it's channeled. You are not angry at these recruits. You don't know them yet. What you're doing is creating a controlled environment of maximum stress in minimum time, because the faster you disorient them, the faster the real work can begin. You watch their faces as they pour off the bus. You've done this enough times now that you can already read them. The one gritting his teeth and trying to look hard, he'll either be your best or he'll fold in week 2, nothing in between. The one whose eyes have gone completely blank and wide, he's gone somewhere internally already, which means he has something to work with. The one already looking around for an exit, that one needs immediate attention. You file all of it. In 30 seconds, you've already begun building a picture of what this platoon is and what it's going to need. Then you get them on the footprints, and the real work begins.
Your daily architecture. Your day always starts before theirs. You're in uniform, you've reviewed the training schedule, you've coordinated with your fellow DIs. You've anticipated every transition point where something could go wrong and built a contingency for it. By the time you kick that trash can down the squad bay at 0500, you've already been working for an hour. You have a senior drill instructor, the SDI, who carries the administrative and developmental weight of the platoon. Then you and your fellow DIs rotate through the daily grind. Close order drill on the parade deck in the Carolina heat, physical training in the morning darkness, classroom instruction on core history and customs, weapons cleaning, uniform inspections, chow.
Every transition is a training opportunity. The way they move from the squad bay to the parade deck, that's training. The way they respond to a command, that's training. The way they look at each other when they think you're not watching, that's information. You are always watching. People think DIs have eyes in the back of their heads. What they actually have is pattern recognition, built from thousands of hours of observation. You know what a squad bay full of recruits looks like when everything is functioning correctly. Any deviation from that pattern registers instantly, the way a wrong note registers to a musician. You find the problems before they become failures. You find the recruit who's been hiding an injury because he doesn't want to be recycled, and you route him to medical before it becomes a serious issue. You find the two recruits who have developed a friction between them, and you separate them before it becomes a discipline problem. You find the one who's been covering for his bunkmate's deficiencies, protecting him instead of pushing him, and you have a quiet, specific conversation that reorients both of them. This is the work nobody sees, not the yelling, the constant, precise, human management of 80 people who are under maximum stress and need leadership they don't yet know how to ask for.
The voice and the silence. You have two primary tools. The first is your voice. You know when to use volume and when to drop it. Volume is for formation, for the parade deck, for moments where the whole platoon needs simultaneous correction. Volume is also occasionally for theater, a carefully calibrated explosion that resets the room's energy, that reminds 80 people what environment they're operating in. But the drop, the sudden, quiet drop in volume, that's the sharper tool. When you stop yelling and your voice goes low and even, and you walk slowly toward a recruit who has made an error, and you speak to him in a voice barely above a whisper, that's when the room holds its breath. That recruit can feel 60-something sets of eyes on the back of his neck. The silence around your quiet voice is louder than anything you could shout. You use this deliberately, sparingly, because it only works as a contrast to what came before. What people never understand from the outside is that you modulate constantly. You know this recruit needs pressure, and that one needs steadiness. You know this moment calls for maximum intensity, and that one calls for you to pull back and let the silence do the work. You are reading the room every second and adjusting every second. You are performing, not falsely. The commitment is real, but you are performing the way a conductor performs, standing in front of something larger than yourself, shaping it with precise movements, knowing that what they produce is only as good as what you bring to that podium.
The weight you carry. Here's what the campaign cover costs. Your marriage feels the pressure. 3 years of early mornings and late nights and coming home with nothing left. Carrying the weight of 80 strangers' development while your own family eats dinner without you. The statistics on DI marriages aren't good. You know the statistics. You check in with your family when you can, and you try to leave the hat at the door, and some nights you succeed. Your body carries it differently than recruit bodies carry it. You're not doing the physical training at recruit intensity, but you're on your feet for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Your voice takes wear, your lower back takes wear. DIs develop a specific kind of physical fatigue that's less dramatic than a 50-mile ruck and harder to recover from. The cumulative exhaustion of sustained performance, day after day, cycle after cycle. And there's something else, something harder to name.
You care about your platoon very well. You don't say it. You will not say it while they're in your house. It would undermine everything you're building. But you know each of their names within the first week. You know which ones have fathers who served, and which ones are running from something, and which ones have no idea yet what they're capable of.
You watch them change week by week, the way you watched yourself change once, and something in you is invested in that change in a way that doesn't have a clean, professional name. When one of them quits, when a recruit comes to you and says he wants to DOR, it lands on you. Not as failure exactly, but as weight. You think about whether you missed something, whether there was a moment you could have reached him differently. You usually don't reach a clean answer. When one of them excels, when the recruit who could barely do 3 pull-ups in week 1 is leading physical training in week 10, calling cadence with a voice that fills the parade deck, you feel something, quietly, behind the campaign cover. Something that looks, from a distance, a lot like pride.
Graduation day. This day is when your pride grows past your hat. Your platoon has earned the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. You watched it happen in real time over 12 weeks. You stand on the parade deck and you watch them march, and they are not the same people who stumbled off that bus 3 weeks ago in the dark. Their shoulders are back, their chins are level, their eyes are straight ahead and clear, and carrying something new. Not arrogance, not performance, but a settled, quiet knowledge of what they've come through. You did that. You and your fellow DIs. You built that out of raw material that showed up in sneakers and civilian clothes, with no idea what was about to happen to them. After the ceremony, something shifts in you. The campaign cover is still on your head, but the architecture it represents, the pressure, the distance, the controlled performance, relaxes for one moment. You shake their hands, you call them soldiers. And some of them, the ones who came the farthest, the ones who almost didn't make it, the ones you quietly fought for when nobody was watching, look at you with something in their eyes that you will remember for a long time. Not gratitude exactly, recognition. The look of someone who now understands what was being done to them and why. Then they go. To their MOS schools, to their units, to their lives as Marines, to deployments and decisions and moments that will test everything you put in them. And you walk back to the squad bay, and in 4 days, a new bus will pull up in the dark again, and you will put your hat back on, and you will do it again. That your job.
What nobody tells you. Nobody tells you that being a drill instructor is the most demanding leadership role in the military. Not in the way people usually measure demanding, not by danger, not by physical intensity, but by the sustained, unrelenting requirement to perform at the highest level of human leadership for 3 years straight, cycle after cycle, with no gap and no reset. Nobody tells you that you will be changed by this as surely as they are. That somewhere in your 2nd or 3rd cycle, you will look in a mirror and see something different, a stillness, a patience, a capacity for reading people that wasn't there before. The recruits think they're the ones being built. You're being built too, quietly, in the same fire. Nobody tells you that the hardest part isn't the hours or the voice or the performance. It's the investment. The fact that you pour yourself, genuinely, completely, without the ability to do it any other way, into people who will leave, who will move on, who will become Marines and soldiers and fathers and leaders in their own right, carrying pieces of what you gave them into places you'll never see. You plant and you don't harvest. You build and you don't live in it. You give and what you gave walks away on its own 2 feet and becomes something in the world that no longer needs you. And then you start again. That's the job. That's the whole job. And you wouldn't trade it.
The drill instructor is not the villain of the story. He was never the villain. He was always the architect, standing in the fire, building something that had to be built in fire, paying a price that most people never see and fewer would pay. If this series is hitting something real in you, if you're finding yourself watching these and thinking about service, about sacrifice, about what it means to be shaped by something larger than yourself, subscribe and stay in it, because we're just getting started. Every branch, every role, every world behind the uniform. You're already here. Stay.